feel responsible about protecting these donors. With the DSR registry, they can make direct contact with each other.
You are right. They absolutely
So,
can.
I give it a few years before I do that.
Carrie, tell us about what your donors do.
I think there's about 3 levels of what can happen here. We have completely anonymous. Of course, there's adult pictures of egg donors in their profiles. So the egg donors have to realize that they're not really truly anonymous in today's age of Facebook, MySpace, Twitter. You name it, a donor can be pretty much found. So most of them are anonymous. However, a lot of my international, and remember I specialize in international, so that's where most of my cases are. I would say that about 80% of my international couples want to meet the egg donor, and this doesn't have to mean that they're going to be known. It can stay semi-known. You meet, you don't exchange last names. I'm often there. I travel personally with every group of donors that I send to overseas. I guess I'm a glorified babysitter. But I do travel with them, so I can facilitate these meetings with the intended parents. And then from there, I can kind of moderate and make sure that the donor stays comfortable, that the intended parents stay comfortable. And if they do choose to exchange full names, though, or email addresses or phone numbers, I can't control that. I can only be there to make sure everybody's comfortable and everybody makes the decision and we talk about it before the meeting. So I know if the donor's not comfortable with that and the intended parent asks, that I can interrupt.
Okay, thank you. Gail, I know you don't run an agency, but you've had lots of years of experience of intended parents. What are you finding now with what you're doing currently? What do parents want?
I think that there's a real trend towards intended parents wanting to have some sort of contact and wanting to possibly have the opportunity to meet. And the thing that varies sometimes is just not all agencies are going to be supportive of that idea, and sometimes they feel like they're protecting the donor, though quite often young women who are donors would be open to the idea of possibly meeting, and it can be a very nice thing. And I think a lot more intended parents are thinking ahead to, having an avenue for their child at some point to be able to gather information from the person who was their donor. As I tell intended parents that right now it's your story, but as soon as you have a positive pregnancy, it's your child's story, and you need to be thinking about that.
Thank you. I know for me, when I did this many, many years ago, I went with an anonymous donor because that's the choice I had. I mean, I didn't see a picture. I didn't know anything other than I trusted my physician, and he matched us perfectly. And in 2012, we met her, and my son met her. He was 11 going on 12, and our outcome's been wonderful. But you do change your mind because your kids will ask you. They're going to ask. They're going to want to know what she looks like. They're going to want to know what she does, what she likes. And I think what pulled at my heart was when my son said, "Mom, is she nice?" I couldn't tell him that she was nice because I never met her. And so because we had the opportunity to do that, she's nice, thank God, but yeah, she's nice. I don't know what I would have done if she wasn't. I was just thinking, what would I do? Lie? I don't know. Okay, so the last question I want to ask all of us, because we're going to go on to lunch, is we've covered some really great stuff. Let's talk about donor screening, because I know that's important. And one of the things I want to talk about in donor screening is, do all of you have your donors see a psychologist or a mental health therapist, and are they screened that way? And can you tell us how that, and I'm going to start out with you. Carrie.
Is that all you want to know, is the psychology
No, I want to talk about the
aspect?
screening, but I'm going to start off with the psychological part and then talk about how you screen.
Okay, yes, all of our donors do get a psychological evaluation with an MMPI or a PAI. And that's for me, I don't treat my donors that are going overseas any differently than my donors that stay in the US. I follow Western standards of screening for egg donors, even though those clinics overseas might not require the level of screening that we put our egg donors through here. I think it's important, and so I really do the same no matter where the donor's going.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. Do your donors, for instance, fill out an initial application online?
Oh, yes.
And then you do like an initial screening?
Yes, I actually personally interview every single donor that comes into my database, and it's an initial 90-minute interview. Often it's on Skype, and again, I'm telling them from a first-hand perspective what it's like to really be an egg donor. and I don't sugarcoat it because I want serious, responsible donors. And I screen them all the same. So it's medical screening, psychological screening. In that we're doing genetic screening for carrier, counsel screening for
Right.
what is it?
Counsel.
Carrier disorder status, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a wide panel.
So there's many aspects to screening, but it's pretty in depth, and it makes a huge difference, especially if you're going to spend on average $5,000-6,000 to send a donor overseas to donate for you. Before she gets on that plane, you want to make sure she's going to be a good donor.
Robin, what kind of donor screening do you do for your donors? Since they're overseas predominantly, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
predominantly. We always have them visit a psychologist that specializes in fertility counseling. If there isn't such a person, say they're in Lebanon last year, then we do have someone that we recommend in the U.S. or Canada that they'll do Skype calls with.
Oh, good.
They also go through at least 3 interviews with us before they get to that point. We haven't had a donor fail a psychological screening in years. Just about all of my employees are past donors.
Oh, really? That's
In
that's
fact, my
amazing.
first one is still, she's been with me 13 years. Yeah.
Great. Gail, again, I know you don't have an agency, but you've got this amazing, she's like the guru of all this stuff, which she really is. I've known her many, many years from where she had worked before. So what do you find in regards to screening? Are you finding that agencies are screening well? I mean, we know that the reproductive endocrinologist is the gatekeeper. The reproductive endocrinologist is going to say, yes, we're accepting your donor, or no, we're not going to accept your donor. But the agency really helps as an integral part of making that process easier. So what are you finding?
Well, I find, the truth is that I work with many, many different agencies, and agencies can't, because they're not medical facilities, they can't do the testing. All they can do is ask the questions, of course, which I think they do a really good job of that. But many intended parents think that the donors that are in agencies have already been through all of the testing, because that's what they think of when they think of screening. So what I tell them, and they'll always ask the question, well, how do you know if these young women are being honest or not? And most of the time these young women are. They're usually sweet people, and their intentions are really very good. So, but I also let them know that there are sort of those checks and balances that, that the donor will go through a psychological evaluation, that it may be a good idea if they're, concerned about genetic issues to speak with a genetic counselor who can, the cost of that is not that significant, and it's probably worth it. Though counsel testing is, can be good, it's very broad, and everyone's going to come up as having everybody's going to be a carrier of something.
Of something.
And so it's like you need to have the,
Yeah,
yes.
about 80%.
Yeah.
So the really important thing is how significant a risk is that? And so that's where the genetic counselor is a really good person to be talking to find out. And of course, it will depend on whether the whoever's providing the sperm, what they may be a carrier for. So those are things that I always tell my intended parents.
Thank you. So I would normally open this up for questions, but we're really behind, and I know all 3 ladies would be delighted if you wanted to come up to them during the day and ask them one-on-one questions. So I'm going to turn this over to you, Sam, because I know everybody's hungry. They want to go have lunch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.